that claim that
which culture are we talking about? Because a lot of them got killed off. They didn't need to be killed off at all. None of them need to be killed off.
Why? Like,
Hogan,
okay, I'm
wait,
going to
hold on,
present
hold
this
on.
one more time.
Bro,
I'm going to present this one more time.
Bro, can you do me a favor and repeat
Sure.
your central claim for me, please?
My central claim is that I don't believe it's unreasonable to believe that certain cultures are superior to others. I think that's a perfectly fine claim.
And why do you think that?
Because I believe there are certain cultures that condone morally reprehensible behavior that other cultures would not, and that we can make an analysis of these two cultures and determine that one is superior to the other.
Oh, hell no.
On a basis of preference, Pogan, the way you do it. Moral preference.
So you're just okay, but that's to say there's no fact of the matter, right? Like
sure.
Okay, so when you say
I'm allowed to have the belief that one is superior to the other, and then make policy and conduct policy.
I want to say this guy.
One second. Let me just clarify the position.
Sure.
So when you say X culture is morally reprehensible, all you're saying is X culture is morally reprehensible by the standards that are set in the culture from which you originate. Is that correct?
I guess you could chalk it up to that, but it doesn't have to be necessarily my values determined by my culture. It could just be a moral preference arbitrarily desired.
So I heard my headphones were dead, but I heard I heard something about Native Americans. You're not going to bite the bullet on something like saying, because of your perception that there are going to be cultures that you view as morally reprehensible, they should be acted against in an aggressive way or destroyed, right? You're not going to make that claim.
Some should.
Can you give me an example of such a culture?
A culture, first of all, we've done a pretty good job eradicating them. But for example, if there was still a culture in today's day and age that condoned slavery, female genital mutilation, cannibalism,
the United States, then.
You've toned down your claim a lot, bro.
Aurora, I'm trying to build up to it, and I understand that a conversation has been happening for half an hour that you just jumped into is
not going to be much utility.
Be quiet.
Look, I'm not interested.
Wait, hold on, bro. Let's not ever talk. Wait, hold on. Let's not ever talk. Let's not ever talk Pogan though. When Pogan speaks,
I'm not interested in the sanitized. I'm interested in.
So I addressed the initial claim. Do you have a counterclaim to what I just said? Because it seems like you would agree with that.
When Pogan is speaking, you need to shut your mouth.
Ezra, be quiet, you cuck.
So I'll respond to what you just said, right?
Oh my goodness.
Mike, if that's what you want to say now, I don't think cultural differences, which are what this just amounts to, are such that in the general case it's going to be justified to annihilate other cultures. Now, I have reason to believe, based on the sorts of things I was hearing earlier, that this is a much more sanitized version of what the claim originally was. So at this point in time, what I would like to do is appeal to somebody who heard your original claim and ask them if they believe this new claim is consistent with the old claim. Is that something somebody would do?
Do you want me to tell you what I heard? So originally it was people only own things if they can keep it by force. The natural order of things is such that, I don't know, like the Indians were doomed to die off because they hunted each other like savages and they killed off all their buffalo and
this
they
is
scalped.
A gross misinterpretation.
They scalped
of what I
other
said.
Indians
and they hung children from trees. Also, a completely different argument.
What it seems like you said, among other things initially, was something like, if what it means to be moral, which is to say good, is maximizing utility, then the genocide of the Native Americans, in your view, would be justified. Is that accurate?
If it was proven to maximize utility.
Yeah, he said that killing them produced the best of a great society.
It was a hypothetical.
When you say
then it would be justified.
And when you say produced the best utility, you mean insofar as neoliberal capitalism is concerned, right?
No, I guess. Whatever way you want to cut it, sure.
Okay, so it seems excuse me.
Correct. Natural. It's simply just natural selection. It's social Darwinism.
This isn't natural selection. It's artificial selection.
So what this bottoms out into something. This bottoms out.
Humans are not outside of natural selection.
What the hell? Who is talking underneath?
This bottoms out into something very simple, right? The standard by which you want to evaluate utility is itself relative. That utility is cashed out in terms of neoliberal capitalism, which is a predominantly, let's be honest, Anglo thing. It's an Anglo ideology. And when I say Anglo, I'm contrasting that with like the Native Americans. So please mute this person if they talk over me again. The point is, when you say things like this, right, you're just saying something like, so long as there is some culture somewhere that is within proximity to us, and it doesn't comport with neoliberal capitalism, the sort of society you want to maintain, they should be eradicated. People should be mass murdered. Now, that's something that a lot of people... That seems perfectly consistent with what you said.
It's not. I'm absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine with adding these people to the system, allowing them to pay into it, provide...
Eradicating their culture...
Provide, you know...
I know what you're saying, but eradicating
their... You don't have to kill them.
Listen to me. Eradicating their culture, right, in the sense that you are talking about, is itself a kind of genocide.
Aren't we living in a genocide of culture already in our own society where people come to the country and have their culture demolished?
Genocide?
Look at fourth and fifth generation Asians. There's nothing left.
What are you talking about? So look, it just seems like what this bottoms out in is exactly what you were accused of, which is just you have this staunch preference for let's call it what it is, white culture, right? To the point that you're willing to eradicate by force or other means any culture that isn't compatible with yours.
Sure.
What part of that statement is accurate?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so if you agree with that, then what you were accused of originally is accurate, which is that you're a white supremacist.
Incorrect. This has nothing to do with race. This is all to do with culture.
Maybe he's just more of a capitalist, not a white
supremacist. When you call someone a white supremacist, you are inferring that there's something that I believe that white people are.
And can you move this guy?
No, that's incorrect.
No,
that's a misrepresentation.
Exactly. Look, please mute Quee. He's not helping. Please mute Quee.
Yeah, mute Quee.
Look, the point is, you are preserving with force in a lot of cases what I would call Anglo-Saxon culture. And when I say Anglo-Saxon culture, you can call it Western culture.
I would call it Judeo-Christian.
Right? Sure, but it's a predominantly white culture, and that has been the case throughout history. And in the case of Native Americans, when you say something to the effect of, well, insofar as maximizing utility is concerned, their genocide is justified, you're really just saying, like, you know, comport to our culture or die. That's the definition of what genocide.
Kogan, the way I look at it,
Let me finish. Please mute, please. Please mute, please. Please mute, please. Please mute, please.
Where are you going, man?
Because please, I wasn't finished. Thank you.
First of all, everybody stop asking me to mod by proxy. Knock that shit off, and you guys, Bro and Pogan, take turns. Go.
I'm almost done. It'll take 5 seconds. The point is, you want to force them to comport to our culture, eradicating their culture being just another kind of genocide, or you just want to get rid of them by force. Both of those actions are genocide, and the sort of culture that you want to preserve in that way is a predominantly white culture by your own admission. So when I say you're a white supremacist, what I'm functionally saying is that you want to preserve a predominantly white culture, even if it means eradicating by force other cultures. That's the accusation.
It wouldn't be too far from accurate. But now I want to show you the way I'm looking at this. I want you to see from my perspective. You're an atheist. I'm approaching this discussion from a purely atheistic standpoint. I don't like to bring my own religious, like, here's the thing. I do believe genocide is morally reprehensible, but I can only say that from
then why are you running a religious belief?
Because I'm trying to be as logical and philosophically consistent as possible
within the realm of
discussing. So Pogan, you entered this discussion late. I was discussing something with atheists, so I have to take the atheist viewpoint. I'm trying to make them be philosophically consistent.
You're just saying the only reason you were running apologetics for genocide is because you were LARPing as like an atheist. Is that the idea?
More or less.
What?
So let's continue. Let's continue. There are some good ideas.
You think there's some atheist culture that we're biting? What is wrong with you?
I don't know.
What's wrong with you? Philosophically consistent,
real quick,
bro.
5 seconds. Look, I don't know if you've caught on. I happen to be an atheist. Right? I'm sure you've gathered that by now. I happen to think genocide is morally reprehensible. I don't know why you think there's some like atheistic monolith or like some hive mind where we all think certain things. Like the only consideration is like logic and philosophy. There are things that happen that you might be able to justify on some utilitarian grounds that I think are absolutely fucking abhorrent. I think that all the time.
It's irrational, Pogan. I'm trying to force you to acknowledge that you have irrational, illogical belief.
I don't think it's merely a question of rationality. I think it's an ethical question.
Yeah,
it might be. Look, it might.
But
be
ideally,
rational.
we should base our ethics off rationality and logic.
It might be rational for me to support the U.S. invading like Vietnam because long term it expands GDP, GDP growth, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm going to sign off on the invasion of Vietnam because I think.
Why?
Well.
Are human lives really that valuable to you, Pogan?
Well, for starters, because
let me ask you, what is a human life other than chemical reactions?
You're like
an electrical signal.
For starters, I think the U.S. military in Vietnam, right, was one of the most like. It's hard to describe it as anything other than like a terrorist organization. I mean, you're talking about U.S. bombers like. Dropping napalm on large swaths of the forest and melting people to the bone. Like I don't. What is that other than terrorism?
Let's reduce this very simply. Do you believe that let's just discuss. I don't know. Let's talk about deer, right, and their antlers. Is it immoral for a deer who has bigger antlers and outcompetes another male sexually, and like removes them from the genetic line? Is that immoral in any way?
I don't think the behavior of animals who are just predisposed to certain things because of their instincts is a question of morality.
Why are we above?
Pogan, is it immoral if a deer builds a nuclear reactor?
What gives us a privileged position above animals?
Drone strikes a baby deer.
I believe human beings have the capacity to deliberate between moral choices.
So, Pogan, I needed to stop you. Someone is sending me messages saying you are not an atheist. You are, in fact, a Jew. This is news to me.
I'm a what?
You're a Jew, and that this is just Jewish tricks.
Those guys are morons. Don't listen to those people.
Pogan is not Jewish whatsoever.
I know. That's the joke. I don't know why they're sending me this. Maybe they don't know I'm also Jewish. Sending me
Let me just repeat what I said to you because I think it's an important distinction. The reason why I don't take it that a lion killing a gazelle is a question of morality is because the lion doesn't have the capacity to deliberate between moral choices. It's merely disposed to do that. It's a predator, right? But human beings have the capacity to deliberate between moral choices. Like given option X. Well, look, given option X.
Why should we?
Why should we? It's just a question of
because we can. Why should we?
It's just gonna be a question of intersubjective agreement on what you value.
So there we go. That's what this all boils down to, Pogan. Preference.
Yeah, and the whole point is that if there's intersubjective agreement on, say, 99% of the human, if there's intersubjective agreement on 99% of the human population being exterminated, you can still have reasons to perceive that as unethical. Right?
Sure, but Pogan, if there are two groups of people, there are two giant, say the Earth was just two huge civilizations, and one civilization was like pacifist and peaceful, and the other one had an intersubjective agreement to just be like, yeah, let's kill all the other guys and take their land. Guess which one is the one that's going to proliferate? Guess which is the one that's going to see the next millennium?
But that's not a question. That's not a question. That's not a question of morality, though. You're just saying like. In such a situation where one state is pacifist and the other state is militaristic, right? The pacifist state is likely to lose a war, right? That's not a moral question, though.
So wait, but Pogan, I don't know why it's unfair to base you said it's just subjective, it's just preference. Why is it unfair to just base my preference on whatever helps me and my own survive. I don't understand. Why is that unfair? That seems logical. That seems like a fair
issue of survival.
Not only that, that seems like it serves my instincts best than anything else.
Hold on,
It's not an
listen,
issue of
he gave you
survival.
the answer. He gave you the answer already.
I'll answer the question. I'll answer it
listen?
again. Because one, the existence of Native Americans does not pose an existential threat to the existence of white people.
You're right about that.
Two, because the sorts of things you're advocating for entail cultures being annihilated by force if necessary, meaning potentially millions of people being killed, all because white people are unwilling to accept those cultures.
So you're right. You're right. And I think we've reached a little bit of agreement. Let's move on to, I wanted to get some basic things out of the way. When we discuss be quiet. When we discuss the Native Americans, who is this?
Seriously, I love this. This is like a...
Got it.
Did you guys learn this when you went to
Hey, mute, please. Someone
Someone
shut this kid up.
My notes on
It's
quad
like
I are
or something. It's that guy's weird. It's like Bartholomew's
simultaneous. Sorry, my notes just for a heads up for moderators. Like, obviously, take my word at what you do, but my notes on this user is simultaneously supports and denies the Holocaust. Like someone who's like, "Oh, the Holocaust didn't happen, but I wish it did."
But it should have. That's hilarious.
Right.
Jesus,
that's my notes on him. My notes are usually accurate. Take that how you will.
Do I have any notes, Kat?
You and I are just gonna agree here.
No.
In summary, though societies can have intersubjective agreement on certain things that they perceive to be ethical relative to their own values, there are some cases where a given society is going to agree to do something that just seems to be a violation of what we constitute to be human rights. One of those things we constitute to be human rights is the right for a culture to exist and for people to not be fucking genocided. So given that your criteria, which one was an existential threat to your own culture, two, an inability to assimilate, given that both of those things are not actually true in the case of Native Americans, it doesn't seem like you have any reason to advocate for their eradication beyond merely some sort of deep-seated personal bigotry against them.
No. I'd like to discuss the Native American question. And remember, I honestly believe that there was
Maybe start by don't framing it by that language, because
I didn't. It's very easy to misinterpret and straw man the argument.
He said
earlier,
in the hypothetical
that I was presenting, that in the overall course of things, right? Like, if it was possible that when the settlers arrived, that they could do business with the Native Americans and reincorporate them into our society, and a
society built on land that was invaded and colonized, right?
So let me ask you, Pogan. What should they?
Don't
wait.
You accept that, right?
The settlers land in the New World, right? They see people are already there, and they should do what? Turn around and go home?
You're asking me, should the land of Native Americans have been invaded and colonized?
Even more simply, let me ask a question.
That's unethical.
Let me ask this: who determines who owns land?
I don't think that's a relevant thing to ask.
It is. Because if we can answer that, if I can understand how you believe that should be dolled out,
look, it's not a question of land ownership. The question is, there's a piece of land, the North American continent, right? And on this piece of land, there are indigenous people who live there. And along come European settlers who, upon arrival, not only declare that they own the land, in the process of declaring their ownership of the land, they begin slaughtering in mass the people that were already there. And your question to me is, do I think that's ethical? My answer is no.
And a lot of people would generally agree. That's the easy position to take. The difficult and the logical position to take is that when we really boil everything down, land ownership is really just determined by who can keep it. Typically, through bylaws. That's it.
Arguments.
Yes, And you provided zero counter arguments to might makes right, other than my feelings don't agree with it.
We can just frame it the other way. Take it that like China, for instance, becomes like the world superpower and invade the United States and have a very high probability of not only winning. If they win, your culture is eradicated. Are you going to say might makes right in that instance?
He wants the Chinese to genocide him.
If I'm going to be philosophically consistent, and that a mass war. Remember, what you're saying is
before you do that. Look, I'm not asking you to like bite the bullet because you don't want to lose the argument. I'm personally asking you if, like, outside these fucking bullshit Discord conversations, you would actually look me in the face and say, yeah, Pogan, I'm fine with the Chinese slaughtering all of us. That's your view?
Hogan, if our country recedes to the point, yes, I said yes.
No question.
Then you're just
yes. I'll say it 1,000 times more.
And two things, right? One, you're an insane
I'm a garbage person.
Two, you're a bigot.
That I want the Chinese to win? That's a new
You're a bigot because you're defending the colonization and genocide and slaughter of Native Americans by European settlers on the basis that might makes right. That's why
I want what is best for humanity, Pogan. At the end of the day, that's all it boils down to.
Look, if you want to talk, wait a second. If you want to talk about what's best for humanity, those events eventually led to the establishment of global capitalism, which is currently destroying the fucking planet.
And we have a disagreement. We have a strong disagreement on that point, but okay.
All right, bro. You're free to be...
We just disagree on whether or not capitalism is evil or not. That's it.
You didn't say anything about evil.
Fine, destroying the planet. I guess we don't believe in the world evil.
No, dude, it's just like... You like bite these like absurd.
I believe capitalism has brought more people out of poverty, raised more people out of low quality of life standards than any other system ever.
Look, I don't have a lot of time. I need to go to bed soon. Okay? You bite these absurd, silly bullets, not because you genuinely believe any of this shit. You wouldn't say this fucking shit like off Discord. The reason you bite these absurd, silly bullets is because you just don't want to lose an argument. Like, why would I talk to a person?
It has nothing to do with losing an argument, Pogan. These are important ideas to acknowledge, rather than just living in a hoity. Like, this is what they want you to think. They want you to think that, oh, it's all moral to care about people. These liberal fucking viewpoints. You're actually feeding into fucking communist, capitalist propaganda right now, dude.
You just asked me what my opinion was, and I gave it to you. My opinion is that Europeans genociding Native Americans is wrong. That's my view. And I think that's a view that most people would corroborate, and the reason they would corroborate that view is because the only reason Native Americans were killed in mass, slaughtered, and culturally genocided, and had diseases spread to them, by the way, that nearly wiped them fucking out, is because white European settlers simply desired their land.
Sure, okay, but wait, so Pogan, do the ends not justify the means?
No.
Do they not?
Not in this case.
Not? Why not?
In this case, because the end...
If really the end goal is an overall plus for humanity...
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, because the end in this case was the establishment of an oppressive global imperialist power that's actively destroying the world, like I said.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, okay, so but the argument is different. It's not the ends justify the means. You think the ends were never justified in the first place. What I'm saying is, hypothetically, if... What does it mean
for the ends to justify the means if the ends are not justified?
Correct. What I think our disagreement is not on whether or not the ends justify the means justify the ends, right? What our disagreement is that you think what resulted from this genocide was never worth it in the first place.
When you say the means justify the ends, what you're saying is like people are doing things absent some intention, but they're still somehow supposed to be right or wrong. The point is that the end is the intention, right? In this case, the end was the establishment of the United States. But if you remove that from consideration and you're just talking about the means, you're asking a question like, people are dying. Do you like or dislike? And like, what the fuck? How are you supposed to answer a fucking question like that absent an intention?
You know what? At the end of the day, buddy, with your philosophy and your political ideology, you're actually okay with certain how do I say it? Unsavory actions being committed.
I'll just save you the trouble. I'll save you the trouble. I'm not principally against some people being killed.
There you go. But it's just a matter of how many, right? That's it.
No, I didn't even say that.
It makes my tummy hurt when it's millions of people, right?
I didn't even say that. What I said was it's not a matter of principle. If you ask me in the general case, do I want people to die?
Probably
no,
not.
I don't. I think that's wrong.
Okay.
But that's the general case. You can always posit some hypothetical where something becomes justified.
Then we're in agreement.
Okay, but you're talking.
If you want to hear my honest opinion about what
not
we did
merely
to the Native
talking
Americans,
about a hypothetical, bro. You're talking about the actual events that transpired as Europeans colonized North America.
Sure, but I was describing it in terms of a hypothetical. You didn't arrive at this conversation when I specifically posited that, right? However, I think we're actually in agreement on this, that in some cases, that certain hypothetical situations that, some people need to die. That's just a fact of life.
Look, when you say need to die,
if it justifies the greater good or whatever you want to call it,
you're missing the point. When you say need to die, need there is going to refer to a particular goal, and the goal
serves the goal.
Right, and the goal here is the establishment of the United States of America. Right? Correct? Okay, so I don't think the ends justified the means. There you go.
Then fine. That's just a difference of belief, though. That wasn't the crux of the argument.
Do you think most people are going to? Do you think most people, if you presented the talking points that you presented to me, would say that the genocide of Native Americans was justified?
I think if I really worked it into them. I mean, there's a lot of propaganda. And our education system has poisoned people with nonsense. I think if I went back 100 years,
I asked was not if you could convince them. The question I asked was, if you asked somebody, do you think the slaughter, the genocide of Native Americans is justified? Do you think they would
probably
say
not, Pogan? But that's not an argument.
Now what reason? Now, by and large, intuitively, what reason do you think they have for saying that? Would you guess?
Because people are, I don't know, propaganda.
Don't say something. Don't give me a cop out like people are retarded. Like, no, people. You actually think people hold that view?
Our education system has misinformed people. People are propagandized.
You genuinely believe people think the genocide of Native Americans is wrong because of propaganda? That's your view?
Oh my god. Why do you always I often find you using this like appeal to the masses thing. That like it's like the bandwagon fallacy. I don't know what the fuck it's called, right?
I'm not saying anybody is right or wrong in virtue of public consensus. I'm asking what
sounds like that's what you're doing.
I'm asking why. Look, you've already told me what you think the consensus would be. So now I'm asking why you think that's the consensus.
I have to think about that more. But let me ask you, Pogan. If you ask the majority of people, do you want to live in communism? What do you think they would say?
I think they would say no.
Why do you think that is, Pogan?
Because their conception of communism is probably related to like the Soviet Union or Maoist China, or
propaganda, American propaganda about those places, right?
Yeah, things from the Red Scare and McCarthyism specifically.
So why is it so unbelievable that I can basically make the same argument?
Because the problem is that the U.S. government had a vested interest in being anti-communist, while the U.S. government didn't have a vested interest in representing, for a long time anyway, representing the Native Americans as even fucking people. The long-term narrative in American education and American history was that the colonization of North America and the subsequent slaughter of Native Americans was justified through something called manifest destiny, meaning it was just de facto justified that Americans would expand through the continent, killing and taking and pillaging to the extent that they had to. That's why.
We want the same thing. You're too soft about it.
What? You're not even.
Imagine what this world could be if you let this petty morality behind. Oh my.
What?
If only we could kill the Indians and then propagandize against it.
Here's the thing. Ultimately, it's why you're a communist. You have this weak, soft slave morality that, like, human life is inherently valuable or something.
I'm not a Marxist for moral reasons primarily at all.
For what reason?
I'm a Marxist. I'm primarily a Marxist for economic reasons. I think most of the predictions made about the capitalist mode of production are probably
I've heard
correct.
this before. So yeah, I understand. It's inevitable. So it's like, might as well pick the winning side, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think, in addition to that, history is determined by the material conditions people are provided. And I think economic systems basically follow a certain tendency. They rise and then they expand and then they die and then give yield to another economic system. That's why feudalism led into capitalism. And I just think the next stage in the chain is going to be socialism.
You might very well be correct. And I'm waiting with bated breath to see if that's the case, right? But I'd like to give a closing statement about this white supremacist thing. In the weird way you defined it, I guess sure. However, I will restate, I do not believe that white people are genetic. There's nothing inherent genetic about white people being superior.
You don't have to take
the evidence. The evidence does not bore that out. However, I do believe that the culture derived and evolved and propagated by generally white people, right? Judeo-Christian values, Western Faustian spirit, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I believe that it's the best thing that has come up so far. I think we've done it better than anybody else.
You take the view, look, it doesn't have to be a genetic thing. You take the view that they have a preferable, superior culture, right?
Sure.
And that's white. You're referring to white culture there, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It seems a little disingenuous to call it white supremacy, because when you ask someone what a white supremacist thinks,
you're literally saying white culture is superior. That's what white supremacy is.
But Pogan, acknowledge that when you say that this guy's a white supremacist, what is the first thing someone thinks? That they think white people, not the culture, the white person is superior. That's the first thing people think.
If I were to explain to a layperson that bro thinks white / Anglo-Saxon culture is superior,
I think they would agree with me.
Is superior to other cultures, right? They're going. I'm inclined to believe the majority of people would describe that as white supremacy.
I actually disagree. I think a lot of people, I believe a lot of conservative Americans would actually agree with me on that.
I don't care if you disagree.
Well, I mean, then what's the point of the discussion?
Well, because I think you've basically just conceded the point, right?
No, I think what I think you're misinterpreting is that I think the majority of people, the majority belief when you describe white supremacy is a genetic basis.
When I say you've conceded the point, what I mean is that you've conceded. You want, for utilitarian reasons, you could justify the genocide of the Native Americans, but all utilitarian means there is that it serves the interests of white culture. And then when I told you were a white supremacist and defined what I meant by that, you just agreed, right? What else is there to talk about?
Hogan, I'm fine with Asians joining in on us in our grand, glorious conquest.
So was
I'm mixed race. What is this?
So was Hitler. In fact, Hitler went so far
as true, actually.
Hitler went so far as to recruit fucking Africans to the Wehrmacht. You're not much better.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Sorry.
North Africa, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that true? Wait, there were black Wehrmacht?
It's absolutely true.
I had no idea about this. That's crazy. 1 second.
There was also something called the Free Arabian Legion, which was literally an entire battalion of Wehrmacht soldiers that were Arab.
Wow. There were black Wehrmacht.
It doesn't change the fact that the Nazis were fucking white supremacists.
Point. But they were white supremacists in a different sense. They included the genetic component.
Well, look, in addition to the view that you hold, which is that white culture is superior, they also held genetic views. But
the genetic part is the more reprehensible part.
Hold on. Had they simply said something like, well, Aryan culture is superior and left out the genetic stuff, they would still be white supremacist.
Yeah, they wouldn't be as bad though. They probably wouldn't have exterminated the Jews if that was the case. Probably a lot less people would have died, right? It's actually a big part of the reason why they were so evil, because of the genetic component.
I'm not going to speculate on what the Nazis would have done or not done had they held slightly different but still basically the same views.
Let me ask you, Pogan. You have to build a racist, all right? And we're trying to make, you have to choose one of the two options, and we have to make him as less evil as possible. Do you choose this cultural supremacy, or do we choose genetic supremacy? Which one is more evil?
What are you fucking asking me? What's the question?
Which of these
genetic
two
supremacy?
ideologies, if you can only pick one, is more evil? The genetic supremacist or the cultural supremacist?
I think you're saying that white people have a superior culture to other cultures. That's what I think your claim is.
No, I'm saying which one is more evil? Just give it to me.
I don't see the need to deliberate on the more evil of
It's
the
just it's just interesting.
I don't know.
What does your intuition tell you? Nothing?
I would probably, I mean, like, insofar, well, look, I think, like, you could justify sorts of policies.
the one that people cannot do anything about, the genetics, is more evil.
Aren't you asking me a question?
Sure, go ahead, Pogan.
I think like the sorts of policies I would think are bad can be justified regardless of which view you hold, right? Like if you, for instance, if you're genocidal, right, that can be justified both on genetic grounds and on cultural grounds, right? The act is the same. I don't think it really matters.
Wait, people justified. I understand that the ends can be, but like for me, the position that like, this is your genetic makeup, you're a bad person, you're an inferior person, and there's nothing you can do about it. That to me is far worse than you've decided to.
I don't know why we're talking
social norms.
This has nothing to do with what we were fucking talking about.
Because I am not a white supremacist. I think that's an inaccurate and dishonest representation of something. Fuck! Stop calling it cosplay. I have like this idea in my head that like I'm wearing like a fucking like cat ears or something.
Cosplay. You're in your little
trench coat. It's a trench coat.
It's okay, bro. Like there are little kids who like going out on Halloween dressed up as stuff. It's okay, man.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Quick question, Hogan. Are you against the use of the OK symbol because it's been co-opted by racists? Do you think it's not appropriate to use that anymore?
I think it depends on the context. I think in most situations it's pretty obvious it's not intended as like a white supremacist symbol.
Chum again would disagree with you, and
that's not true.
Yes, he would. He said so.
No, that's not.
It's like asking me. Let me give you an analogy. It's like asking me if I think the Pepe frog is racist. I would say most people, when they post like Pepe emojis or memes, probably don't intend it to be racist, but there are people who do.
Yeah, so what I said was that someone probably shouldn't use the Italian hand gesture because people link it to white supremacists and how they identify each other. Same way that someone shouldn't wear a Hitler mustache.
And I'm assuming if you're philosophically consistent, Pogan, you would disagree with him.
Like I said, context matters.
Context does matter, but Chum just made a blanket statement that you should basically like. It's probably good practice to never use it.
The diver's using the OK symbol. We know he's not being racist, or she's being racist.
I mean, they might be a racist diver. You don't know. There might just be a white supremacist that likes to go, deep sea diving.
That's what they do. It's like.
Case in point, I love to go deep sea diving. So apparently one white supremacist likes it. Yeah, there we go. I just broke your argument, Afro.
Diver clubs.
It has nothing to do with it's about using it in a certain way. Like you could easily just give a thumbs up. But like if there's like a group of racists hanging out with each other and they're posing for a photo and a couple of them flash the OK gesture, they're probably using that to like signal to each other and signal to the other people that aren't in the photo.
Well, it's probably not useful to tell people who are already white supremacists to not use white supremacist symbols. They probably don't give a shit.
Yeah, and they do if they don't want to be associated with it, and the people who are white supremacists don't care because they don't care if they get associated with it. Because that's the whole point of it.
That's the context.
I'm trying to find a way to associate the word chum with like a white supremacist. I think if I was more creative, I could.
Okay. The point isn't that it gets used.
Change your name.
The point isn't that it gets used once. The point is that the actual white supremacists start using it amongst themselves, and it gets well known that that's what they do.
Okay, chum, got you. We've beat this to death.
Yeah, if you
I knew this like hours ago.
I know. I feel bad for even bringing it back up.
The argument. We all know what the answer is.
Let me ask you a question, Afro.